So welcome, we're really excited to have you guys here today. We're going to be having a discussion and sharing some research with you about the learning experience. We're going to look at what can happen when you close the gap between what kind of learning experience your employees want and what the organization is actually giving them. We're also looking to hear from you today. I think it's really special that we can have peers across different industries and locations together today. So I want to go over a few items to help make the most of our time together and spark some conversation today. So your audio has been muted automatically. However, we don't want to let that stop you from being a part of the conversation. If you want to share a comment with the full group, including other attendees, please use the chat feature in your GoToWebinar panel. You can feel free to test that out now and say hello to everyone, and you can just select to send that to the full group. Aside from that, if you have a question directly for the speakers you'd like answered or want to communicate with the organizers directly, please use the question panel. We'll try and answer your questions along the way, as well as we'll save some time for questions at the end. Again, the questions will go just to the speakers and the organizers, where the chat you can use to add comments for the group to see. We've also included a few polls as a part of the conversation today. The polls will launch automatically and your responses will be shared in aggregate with everyone. Finally, everybody who received or who registered will receive an email with the recording of today's webinar, along with the slides that are shared today. And let's go ahead and get started by introducing today's speakers. So joining me from Open Sesame is Diane Haynes. Diane is the Vice President of Marketing for Open Sesame, and she has over 20 years of experience working in marketing, product marketing, and product management in both the software, healthcare, and biotechnology industries. Diane has spoken at conferences both nationally and regionally on how technology and trends in the industry are impacting today's world. She's passionate about serving customers and solving the business challenges they have. Prior to her role at Open Sesame, Diane helped co-found a startup and worked at large organizations such as Sage, OHSU, Agilent Technologies. Joining her today as co-host is Arun Prakash. With more than 2 decades of learning industry experience, Arun is a seasoned learning architect and an expert in envisioning and implementing effective out-of-the-box training solutions, collaborative learning networks, and knowledge management systems. Arun has experience consulting large corporations and diverse audiences, as well as setting up and managing learning organizations. As the Chief Learning Architect at Infopro Learning, Arun is responsible for working closely with key and large accounts in understanding their business goals and subsequently aligning those goals with measurable learning outcomes and learning solutions. So you've got 2 great speakers here today. Again, I'm going to turn that over to them just to further introduce themselves. And if you need anything, please let us know. Again, you can use the chat panel to join in the conversation and comment along with your peers, or if you want to pose a question to the speakers, please use the question panel. Diane, I'll let you get started.
Great, thanks Brittany. Thanks very much for joining us, everyone. First, with a little bit about Open Sesame, just so you know where our perspective comes in and why we're here today. Essentially, Open Sesame helps companies develop the most productive and admired workforces. We have the most comprehensive catalog of e-learning courses, and we essentially help organizations like yours to curate the right courses you need for your diverse workforce, make sure the quality of the courses meet your high standards, integrate them with any LMS, and then finally make sure the courses update easily so you don't have to do that. We are really pleased to be co-presenting with our partner from Infopro Learning. Arun, would you want to talk a little bit about Infopro before we get started with the presentation?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Diane. Thank you, Brittany. So Infopro has been there for over 20 years now, and it's got a long history in helping clients address strategic learning problems that unlock human potential. What we do is deliver custom learning solutions across multiple verticals, and for pretty much everything from modernizing old learning content to HR chatbots. We are headquartered in New Jersey, but we have offices worldwide, and we work with top performing organizations all over the world. I am thrilled to be part of this presentation, and thank you, and welcome to this one.
Super, thanks. So I'll get us started. I don't think it's going to be shocking for many of you if I said that business today is drastically different than it was 10 to 15 years ago. I think we're all feeling it. And from some work done and some research done in this article around a new culture of learning, there's a lot of factors that are involved in why business is changing. And these are just some facts, and we'll go over a couple of these that are contributing to that. First, for example, every day, 10,000 baby boomers are reaching retirement age every single day, but less than half of them are saying they're going to retire at the age of 65. So the question is going to be, and what we're finding with a lot of our customers is, many companies, and based on this information, that over a third of companies are saying that they're really not prepared for this projected increase in older workers. It's not something that they've prepared for. And with that in mind, it's pretty staggering that, similarly with those older workers with their skills, that most companies don't believe that their leaders are prepared to bring their business into the future. And that's pretty staggering, especially if you consider how fast both those baby boomer employees as well as their leaders, their skills they've gained are becoming more obsolete faster today than ever. What you learned and I learned 10 years ago has become obsolete already. And half of what you learned 5 years ago is already irrelevant. So the fact that there's going to be a lot of older workers and that leaders are not quite ready to bring companies into the future really speaks to the challenge that is out there for many of these companies. So what does that mean for our workforce today and into the future? Well, again, I don't think many of you will argue with me to say that the workforce is really very different today than it was just a few years ago. As this quote from McKinsey Institute reflects, technology has not only changed who does the work, but it's also changed the pace that people need to adapt to the changes. I mean, the expectations that advances in technology have brought us means that not only the way we're doing things is different, but also what we expect and how quickly we expect changes to happen and how quickly we expect adaptation to happen has changed. Years ago, the old paradigm, for example, was that the contract between an employer and an employee was really defined around loyalty and tenure. Now, the new paradigm is really that employees, especially millennials, they're less incentivized by security and benefits, and they're more eager to take on roles that offer new experiences, flexibility, and the ability to change and adapt, just like Mackenzie's talking about. So instead of buying their loyalty with tenure, we as companies are having to earn it by helping employees be more agile and more purposeful. We can't buy employees for life anymore. But if you and I as an employer give an employee a great skill, help them in their career, help them be adaptive and agile, they're going to be loyal to the company while they're here, and they'll stay with us perhaps a little bit longer than the 2 to 3 year average we're seeing these days. Another perspective on this is from Josh Bersin, who's a well-known HR analyst. He issued his 2018 Global Human Capital Trends report, again, noting around how technology is advancing at an unprecedented rate, and it's completely transforming the way we live and work and communicate. Basically, the digital world of work has changed the rules of business. I think, again, many of us would agree with this. But what's interesting and what we hear and see in this study was that we as organizations have to completely change our mindset. In fact, the folks who contributed to this report said that nearly 90% of leaders of organizations rate building an organization of the future as a key priority. So they know, and we know, that we may not be ready today and we have to be ready for the future, but in building that organization future is really important. The scary part of what was said in this report is that only 11% of those same leaders believe they actually have the capabilities to build that organization of the future. And that's a huge gap between 90% of them knowing that they need to do it and only 11% of them thinking they actually have the capability to doing it. So that's a huge gap in particular. So the situation, I think, is pretty clear because there's lots of implications for us in learning and development to help that organization, prepare that organization for the future and our leaders. And I think the big part of what we're going to talk about is around what L&D's role is in this and what major challenges you are facing. So in a recent study that we did with our Open Sesame customers, we asked L&D professionals about what their major learning and development challenges are that they have at their company. As you can see from this, much of what we heard was about today's workforce or foundational challenges. I mean, you see things like, we need to build a learning culture at the top. We need to meet the needs of a diverse workforce. We need to serve multiple different functions, training a mix of managers and employees. These are all things that are about today's workforce, getting learning accepted and supported. You have to really go pretty far down the list, about 2/3 down the list, you see building future leaders to start to reach more far-reaching challenges about the future. And so I think essentially, what we're taking a look at, and this is also noted in this Fosway report, is that where we are with L&D is we're really more focused on performance development today versus the future. And Fosway, who's a leading analyst group in Europe, recently published this report called Moving the Learning Needle. And they call out that even though that we as organizations have identified that learning must be aligned with organizational goals, the execution of our learning programs is still pretty reactive to the day-to-day operations of today versus maybe organization goals that are longer term and more strategic. This is a great indication that learning has executive buy-in, but that we're in transition and we have to pave the way to make sure that the learning mission is, that learning is mission critical. The drivers for learning aren't learning centric. And most of these is, again, if you look at the challenges we saw on the last page, as well as this one, much of what's happening in learning today is about driving productivity and things about today, not necessarily about what we need to do for the future. So I think one of the major questions that we want to talk about and address today is, how do you marry sort of the disparate interests of your employers, we as employers, and what we need to do both short-term and long-term with those interests of the learners themselves. So first, we're going to go ahead and do a poll now. This is where we get you all involved. You get to get out that finger on your mouse or your trackpad, and we're going to ask you a poll. You should see that pop up on your screen now, and we want you to select one of these choices. So what we're going to ask you is, does your organization currently tie learning and development to your business goals? So if you could select one of the following, and then we will share the results with you as soon as we start seeing some things come up. And the first choice is, yes, we have executive buy-in and a culture of learning. So you're doing quite well. You, I would say, would be doing quite well. Second, no, we haven't quite gotten there yet. That's a great, honest answer, I have to say, and quite self-aware. And then third, we try, but we haven't succeeded in fully proving L&D's impact. So I gave you all a little bit of time to kind of respond. And then in terms of the results, I think Brittany's going to share those results on the screen. So you'll see that, wow, you all were really honest. So 42% of you said, hey, we haven't gotten there yet. We are not tying L&D to business goals. And again, not surprising. You don't think you're in the minority. You're both in the majority here, but you're also in the majority just in general, what we find. Secondly, we try, but we haven't succeeded. So that's a little bit different from the first one, but it's still similar in the sense that you're trying. Perhaps you've put some initiatives in place to try to get there, but you haven't succeeded. And then there's 20% of you, my goodness, that we need to learn from you because you have said, yes, we have executive buy-in and a culture of learning. So basically the majority of you all on the call, and it's probably why you're here today, you have not been able to tie learning and development to business goals yet. Oh gosh, sorry. Very touchy mouse here. And that's a fundamental challenge. And I think that's, again, what Burson talked about in his report, that the biggest gap that we see today is between what employees want, which is on the left, versus what employers in L&D offer in the area of learning and career development opportunities. And that's essentially what Burson said in terms of why that big gap between the 90% and the 11% that we saw earlier was that That's the gap that they see as the biggest challenge, is that what we're offering in L&D to the employees doesn't match up with what those employees want. And so I'm going to turn it over to Arun now to kind of talk a little bit about the learning experience and how we can address that gap.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Diane. So learning experience. Now this is a bit of a trendy word nowadays, but we actually take a lot of cues from our colleagues in the customer experience department, who are highly committed advocates for their audience. And as L&D professionals, there's plenty of knowledge to borrow and adapt from proven models. So you would have heard about the outside-in approach. Rather than ideating from only cues that come from inside, and which is business strategies internally and pushing them out. We also have to take cue directly from the customers, directly from the learners, directly from the audience that are influenced by the strategies. That's what this outside-in approach means. Brittany, you would need to probably help me out. I can't move the, yep, that's good. Thank you very much. Thanks. So so what I'm saying is that we need to not only look at from the insides out perspective, where we're talking about, okay, what does organization want? What are the business strategies? What are the goals that we're trying to achieve? How do you want to go there, and so on and so forth. To also trying to understand what the learners want. Diane mentioned that the millennials are coming in, the new workforce that are coming in, they need that. There is no two questions about it. That's a reality. We need to face it, and we need to figure out what they want and what they want to do to effectively, perform in their jobs, right? Trying to move forward again. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So, so there are a few critical business outcomes that learning can impact right away, right? So one is the employers becoming a talent magnet. Attracting and retaining talent is a big problem for organizations right now. There is a study that's come out from the National Federation which says that 45% of all small businesses were unable to find qualified candidates to fill job openings. That's a huge number, right? And 60% of employers have job openings that stay vacant for 12 weeks or longer, right? Which costs them what, 800,000 annually in lost productivity. What that really means is that even though we see the unemployment rate is lower than it's been in decades, there's a significant gap between openings and appropriately skilled job seekers. So there are people that are out there, but then the job openings have changed, which means we need to skill people more. We need to find the right kind of audience to do this, right? Then what that also means that we need to have a well thought out learning experience that need to be created to get these employees, new and old, the foundation that they need to be successful in their organizations. Then of course you have the performance, part of it. Now, how does it impact performance? There are direct and immediate impact on outcomes like performance and culture as well. There are enough proofs as well in the market. Like for example, a recent study from IBM says that 84% of the employees at the best performing organizations are receiving the training they need, compared to only 16% of the worst performing ones. What that means is that it's a direct correlation between how you what you provide as training programs, what you provide as learning environments and experiences to the success of the company itself. There is interesting another data from Deloitte which says that but 94% of executives and 88% of employees believe a distinct workplace culture is important to business successes. So what it also means that people also realize the fact that there has to be an environment for success. There has to be a learning environment. There has to be an environment where they can try out new things. They can find something new. They get whether it's technology, process, product, what have you. But that atmosphere is very important. I'll take a pause here, and Brittany, can I launch the second poll here, just to get an idea on what your biggest driver is for L&D initiatives, right? So there are two options here. One is that you do deliver learning in response to specific business needs, or it's an access to continuous self-directed learning and coaching. So there are two areas. And which one do you? In many companies, you do both. I understand, but which one do you do more?
Perfect. And we're getting some answers in now, and I'll share those in just a minute. I'm going to give people a few more seconds to vote here. All right, looks like we got a pretty good percentage, so I'm going to go ahead. Actually, we got a couple more coming in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this and share the results with you guys.
Excellent. So we deliver a response. This is one of the greatest things that can happen. So there are business needs, and you respond to those business needs with learning, right? Now this is a great place to be, because it's direct response to the market changes and business realities. And then there are access to continuous self-directed learning and coaching. Very honest, 19%, there's a reality out there in the market as well. There are positives and negatives of both of these. Delivering in response to specific business needs is absolutely required, but only the problem being that by the time you realize the business need and by the time you respond to it, there is not enough uptake. There's not enough time for people to get as part of it and then utilize those knowledge. And the second hand, unless you do have a continuous learning and environment and experience that they have, that they can improve themselves as employees of the company, it will be very difficult to respond to market realities, because those realities are changing very, very fast, very, very volatile, right? Moving on. So let's figure out now how to build an experience, right? So I'm taking one of the examples here. How do you put this into action, and what does this really mean, right? How does this learning experience work in action, right? That's what we're going to look at. Let's move on. So this is an example. So for example, let's look at an employee life cycle. So if you look at the diagram on the right side, it talks about attracting to offboarding, right? If you go clockwise, so attracting, and there are feelings of people. Now, if you really look at it, this is from an outside-in perspective, that when the learner or the employee comes into the company, what are their feelings? So if you have a good attracting program that you have, a good marketing program that you have, the feeling should be that I must join this winning team. And then the recruitment happens, and when the person is recruited, the person should be left the feeling saying the team needs my services and they like me, right? So it's a feling that is there. It's a reaction that is coming out there. And then there's a whole onboarding process. I'll talk more about the onboarding as a specific case study here. That's the reason I highlighted that in this indigo color. Then, of course, going forward, you have the develop, where they feel that I'm learning and growing. There's retention. My services are appreciated here, so I stick along there. And then offboarding. Of course, you have to move on at some point in time if that's what you think. So you have to leave with the feeling, I had a great time here, and probably I might come back. So specifically focusing on onboarding, where we should be, the employee should be left with the feeling of, I am now part of the team. I'm now part of this, tribe that is here. That onboarding, we define slightly differently. So if you look at the left side of the screen, the first definition, which says the induction and assimilation of a new employee into a company or an organization, is the more prevalent definition of onboarding. But we call it a little bit different, calling organizational socialization, and it's a mechanism through which new employees acquire the necessary knowledge, skills, and behaviors to become effective and productive organizational members and insiders. So we expand that a little further to say that it is not just inducting the employee into the organization, but taking that person through the entire cycle to give them the right kind of skills, the knowledge, and the behaviors to become effective and productive insiders, right? With this as a backdrop, let's move forward. Oops, I'm sorry. Can you go up one slide, please? I don't know why am I not able to go up. Yep, that's the one. Thank you very much. So for an employee to be successful, an employee to be a successful insider, there are 4 connects that the employee must make to make sure that they are in the right place, and they think they're in the right place, and they get the right feeling, right? The first one is called the company connect, right? It's a connect where they say, who am I working for? Which company is this? That comes from purely from the attract part of it, from the brand value, the brand image that you build in the market. So there's a sense of pride there. And then who do I work with? I mean, are we talking about IBM 15 years back, white collars, ties and suits, or are we talking about a more modern Google or a Facebook kind of a culture where it's a very, very casual atmosphere at the same time? Let me take that back. Very informal atmosphere there. So what do I associate myself with, and who do I work with? That's the culture part of it, right? And then I have the craft part of it. Now, pretty much everybody coming into the company, they know what they're supposed to do, more or less. But what do I do to meet expectations in this particular company, in this particular organization, in this particular team that I'm going to be part of, right? So if I'm a coder, for example, I know, and I'm supposed to code in Java, I know Java, but what are the codes and what are the standards? What are the guidelines that this company uses? I might be part of a retail chain, and I've been in the supply chain industry before, and I know exactly how it works. But what do we do here? I mean, what are the kind of systems that we use here? What are the kind of processes that we use here? That's what the craft means, and we need to teach them and make sure that they understand it very well. And of course, the last one is a performance connect. That is, when I do something, when I perform in the company, how do I know I performed well? I mean, who would, give a pat on my back saying that, hey, you did a great job, or somebody would give me a feedback saying, hey, you need to improve here or something. How does a performance thing work, right? And how soon? There's a lot of data available in the market as well, which says that especially the millennials, they expect almost immediate feedback, because they are brought up in an environment where they have instant gratification. So they have some kind of a sense of achievement the moment they do it. So you do a good job, they expect somebody to come up and say, hey, you did a great job. Or if you didn't do, you can go up to them and say, hey, this is not correct. You need to change this, change this, change this. And in fact, they are most amenable, compared to all the older generation that we have in the workforce, right? Let's move on. Now, if these are the 4 connects, then the objective of the employer is to minimize the disconnects, right? So, and what we call as the expectation mismatch of friction points, right? And what we do is that we do it by identifying activities, right, that address the satisfaction drivers of the 4 connects. So we talked about the feelings, right? So we call them, if you elaborate that a little further, we call them satisfaction drivers. So we need to identify the right set of activities that will satisfy those satisfaction drivers, right, in this 4 connects. Once we have the activities, we create an onboarding journey with these activities that takes the employees through various stages of the onboarding experience. So it is not a one-time event. It has to be a journey, right? And then, of course, at the right time, putting the onus of success to the right party, setting expectations, saying that here's what I want you to do, here is what you can expect from me, here is what you can expect from the organization, and here is what I expect from you at every step. So that as long as we have these mapped out, the friction points can be minimized and the disconnects can be minimized, right? So we'll go a little further on this, and I will show you an example there as well as we go further. Can we move further? Next screen. Yep, excellent. So if you look at the screen, what we're trying to do is that we are trying to figure out, how do I minimize the disconnect from the outside and inside out perspective? So the first box that you see here is the employee experience, or the outside in perspective, right? Now, some of these are not a comprehensive list by any chance, but some of these would include the proud association with the company, or an inclusive culture, or clear expectations of what is supposed to be done, and what is expected out of me. Constructive feedback and review, growth and development opportunities. These are some of the areas where we clearly mention, we get the outside in perspective. And then the employer experience would be saying, as long as we say the higher technical competency parameter, or correct behavioral attributes, adequate understanding of jobs, some of these are met, they say that the employer would also be the right has the right experience. If we can connect these two, then we would have a good onboarding plan, right? We would have we can have a reduction of total onboarding time. We can have a reduction of time to proficiency. We will have engaged employees and higher ROI of new hire process. Now, this is the we have a whole methodology of finding out the maturity curve and where the where the organizations are pegged at each point in time, but this gives us an overall perspective of how to approach the employee, the outside in and inside out. I'll go deeper one step further. Can we go? This is very small. I don't expect you to read this. We will give you a worksheet at the end of it, and Brittany and Haley will help us, give you that. If you look at this one, on the left-hand side, you see the outside in approach on the top and the inside out approach on the bottom, right? And that's a y-axis. On the x-axis, what you have put in are the 4 connects: the company, the culture, the craft, and the performance. And these are the 4 connects. On top of it here, at the employee's view, there are a bunch of satisfaction drivers that are there, right? Now, these satisfaction drivers are, from an employee's perspective, which means it is from an outside-in perspective. Now, these could be saying the same thing that we just talked about. For the company connect, it could be feeling inclusive, or it could be some pre-boarding. It could be, easy employer's effort to understand me, for example. Those are some of the feelings that the employee can get. At the bottom, you would see the satisfaction drivers for employers, and that could include something like increasing enthusiasm of this person before they join the team, and so on and so forth, right? Then you have the effort. This is a little unclear here. What you have here is that there is this graph that starts here and goes all the way up here, right? Now, this means that the effort of the employee is minimal as they come into the company when they're onboarded, and they expect the company to take charge here. But as they go forward to company, to culture, to craft, to performance, the expected effort of the employee is very, very high. The actual flip is here. It's a little light here. I don't know why it's showing up like that. Probably go to meeting. It is here, and this goes down to this place, right? So the effort by the employer has to be at the top in the beginning. It should be front loaded, but it would go down as they progress and the onus goes back to the employee. This never really goes down to zero, but then very minimal, and employees have the onus to perform. And this entire journey can be categorized into these items on the top, right? So you have the pre-boarding, the orienting, the onboarding, the integrating, the performing, and the excelling of the employee in various times in the organization. And the online program, the journey could be just from the program start date to it going way into T plus 9 months, or it could be 10 months or 11 months. We have to be with the employee to make that people successful. Now, mind you, because these are the finding the right resources are difficult, because the right skills are very scarce in the market, it's important to make sure that we as employers take the onus of making the employees successful. So we have to make sure that we take them to that journey in the path to get there. Now, to fulfill these activities, there is a whole bunch of learning programs that you can create, right? Now, these learning programs could be custom learning programs. These learning programs could be, coaching programs or mentoring programs. It could be a collaborative platform that you have set up in the company. It could be as simple as emails that you send out as part of pre-boarding. It could be assigning a buddy, on the first day, that person goes out, and the person, connects with his new employees, goes out for lunch that first day. So they feel as part of the tribe, they have somebody to, work with and ask some questions which are not covered in regular onboarding or what have you. In the whole process, what really happens is that the employee feels part of the tribe. That's very important. They need to know that they are part of the organization. They are getting around. They know they can get answers when they want it. They know what they're trying to do, and so on and so forth. The custom courses are typically courses or learning programs that are created addressing the business challenges and problems. So it could be saying that, okay, you must know this process, so there is a training on the process. You must know this product, so you give them the training, the product training. You must know this particular software, so you train them on the software. These are all responding to market challenges or business challenges. But there's a whole lot of other skills which are there, and that's one of the places where Open Sesame comes into play, where they have tons and tons of courses which will really help these people prepare themselves for the next level, right? And that's where we need to make sure that there's ongoing, continuing education has to be served to these particular these set of employees and customers that we work with, the learners that we work with. I'll take a pause here, and I will pass the control back to back to Diane. Diane, you want to continue from here?
Great, thanks. Everyone, I really love that notion of outside in and inside out. And as you said, it takes a lot of different types of training to help the employee through their life cycle. In some recent research we did with IDC last year, we heard pretty similar feedback. We surveyed over 200 companies and compared the L&D practices of best performing companies to those of the entire sample set. And what we heard echoes what you have been sharing about offering courses all along the journey. We found that the more courses an organization offered, the more learners would participate in e-learning. And you see that in the chart on the left. So the number of courses they offered, as they increased, they saw a lot more learners participating in e-learning. And even so, they also saw a higher percentage of the overall enterprise participating in e-learning in general as they offered more courses. This is not because there are more courses, because we all know more isn't always better. But in this case, it's because offering more enabled learners to find courses that they were interested in, that they could relate to, that were relevant to them. So as we all know, and as Arun talked about, there are courses that you require your employees to take. But if you really want to establish that culture of learning and really be relevant to what they need, you have to offer more than just the required courses. You need to be able to allow learners to choose training in addition to required training, so that they will find things that will help advance their skills, get them that next promotion or that next job. But having the courses alone really doesn't mean the learners will consume them. So from that same survey, what we learned from these best performing companies, that it was pretty important that you as companies ensure that, one, in order to make sure that consumption was large from your employee base, that you saw good penetration. And this is like any marketing. You've all now turned into marketing people. But essentially that you really have to market your e-learning programs and courses on a regular basis to increase penetration amongst your learner base. Also, you have to make sure that, the second point was, you have to make sure that the courses have relevance and are applicable. In other words, we talk about curation here. You have to curate and select the right courses that are relevant and applicable to your learner base. If you offer a lot of courses that no one really finds interesting, they're not going to come back again. That's the reality. They'll take a look through it and they'll say, okay, there's nothing for me, and they won't come back again. The third thing that has, I think, changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years is that the courses have to be really easy to access. Not everyone works at a desk. More and more people are working remotely. They're traveling, they're commuting, they're working off hours, unfortunately. They're working out in the field. Maybe they work in a warehouse and they don't have a desk, but they have a tablet or a mobile device. So making sure that your courses are easy to access wherever they are, anytime they want to take the courses, is really important. And then finally, the other key to ensuring engagement and participation and consumption of e-learning was that manager support. Managers are really key to reinforcing that training's important. You should set aside time for it. We're going to allow you time for it, as well as you should apply it in your everyday activities. Once you've done training, managers should expect to see a change in behavior or performance based on the training. And, for example, many of our customers, executives have a certain initiative. It might be diversity and inclusion or something else. Well, if the executives are talking about a topic or a manager is talking about a topic, when you roll out that training that's related to it, you're going to see that participation from your employees is going to be much higher because they're going to see how it's tied to your overall business objectives. And that's why manager support is really key. So I think we've got one last poll.
Yeah, I think it was interesting, Diane, you mentioned about consumption, and I know that that's a kind of unique measurement, but I wanted to see how other people are measuring the success of their learning program. So I'm going to put up this final poll, and fortunately, I couldn't put quite as many answers as we wanted to, but you're able to select more than one, and it's going to be about the metrics that you use to measure the success of your learning program. So I just started that poll, and again, you can select multiple answers here. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to plug those in, and just think it'd be good for the group to see how others are tracking success. So we're getting some votes coming in. Give you guys a few more minutes before I share. All right. Got a couple more coming in.
Okay, last chance.
Right.
Brittany's going to push the button here.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this out and share the results with you guys.
Great. So it's super to see that a lot of you are looking at e-learning utilization rates to measure success of your learning program. So this is super. It's not just about putting the courses out there, but you're actually trying to measure whether or not people are using more of those courses. Improved employee engagement is also up there. But equally to that is that you're not measuring the success of your training program. So that too is up there. So you can kind of see the polar opposites of the audience. And again, not surprising. Some folks are also looking at improved employee performance. That's usually a kind of a more, I'd say, sophisticated measure if you're able to tie training directly to employee performance. And then the last category around achievement of competency development, there's a few of you who are measuring that out there. So definitely a broad array of folks and what you're doing in your organizations. You definitely want to try to measure how your training program is doing, because especially as budgets are getting tighter and resources are getting tighter, you're going to have to demonstrate how training is contributing to your overall company. So we found our most successful customers are ones that are able to do some of this tracking and measuring so that they can prove to executives for further investment into those programs. Great, thanks, Brittany.
Yep, I'm going to hide that and let you kind of wrap up here.
Okay, great. So just so you know, kind of wanted to summarize the key takeaways from today and the time we spent together. I think pretty clearly, pretty outlaid that L&D has to evolve to support the evolving business challenges. So we need to change just as much as the businesses are challenging, and really pace together on that. Second, as Arun really talked about, and I thought it was a great way of looking at it, is we really need to do a better job at bridging business and employee needs with an outside in and inside out learning strategy. Remember, we talked about earlier that there's this huge gap between what employees are looking for in terms of training and what we as L&D organizations and companies are offering. So by involving the employees more and understanding more what they need and having more of a learner-centric view and in our strategy, we'll be able to close that gap. And then lastly, we talked about really making sure you're maximizing the return on investment of your learning programs by ensuring that learners are taking, engaging the training, as well as measuring those programs so that you can demonstrate, hey, if we put money into training, we're going to see a return on that investment. So therefore, we should continue to put even more money or more resources or something like that into training. So that's really key. And as we saw from the poll results, there's a big mix of what's going on out there. And like I said, from what we've seen from best performing companies that we deal with or customers that we deal with, they are able to do all three of these things, not overnight. Well, let's be realistic, right? This is not overnight, but really in recognizing, one, that we need to evolve, two, figuring out how to do that by being more learner centric, and three, measuring the programs we put in place to make those changes. So I think that's the end of our presentation. You can kind of see Arun and I's contact information if you'd like to reach out to us. I know that Brittany's been getting some questions along the way. Are there any ones that we have not answered in the presentation that we need to address?
Yeah, we've got a few for you here. So the first one we've got is from Alex, and he asks, when you're mapping or aligning learning programs with this inside out, outside in approach, do you reassess every year or quarter, or how often? Alex says that he finds that their business priorities change often, and he's worried that it would undermine this effort.
Great. So Arun, do you want to comment on that before I
Sure. I mean, in fact, that's a great question. I mean, that is one of the challenges that we're facing, right? So, and that is the reason why preparation for taking on new training is very important, right? So if the business realities would change, now creating new training programs and updating existing training programs is not always possible. I mean, it is not always possible for us to, okay, now let's revamp the whole training program. That's when their ability to take on new knowledge and skills becomes very, very critical. And that's where the continuing learning as a culture is very, very important. So once you have the culture, then the employees are very quick to pick up small changes. So you don't need to worry about smaller changes and smaller business realities. They can pick it up, and they will be able to pick it up because they're trained to pick up those new ones. But if there are bigger ones, then of course you will have to create more custom training programs. So custom training programs again has to be, and from a different perspective, has to be looked at in two different ways. There are programs which have a longer shelf life. If you create those custom training programs, you would need to figure out how to create them, how long should you spend on them, how much money you spend on them, and so on and so forth. And if the shelf life is very small, you would rather take decisions on how quickly can I create it, how quickly can I change it, and so on and so forth. Like, for example, one of the ways to look at it is that can I use a rapid authoring environment to create a learning program? So quickly get it out there for the change, and then I can change it fast as well. But if it's a longer lasting ones, then I might want to go for something like an HTML5 native programming kind of a thing. So it can sustain a little more time, and it's not dependent on systems or devices or programs per se, right? So that's the context. Diane, you want to add something there?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, I see Alex's comment here. I don't know how often your business priorities change. If it's really, really often, that might be challenging. But I think what we often see is our best practice is we meet with our customers quarterly to reassess their content for their training programs and mapping to what they're doing. The reason for that is that perhaps a business changes their priorities every quarter, but what we normally do is a quarterly cadence, because it may not be the entire business that's changing their priorities, but there might be a particular group that pops up that needs to do something different. So if we have a quarterly cadence, we can catch not only sort of what I'd say the ad hoc or maybe surprise initiatives that come up that need training mapped to it, or if the overall business change priorities change, you can catch those as well. We found that once a year is usually not enough. Some people don't have the bandwidth to do it more than once a year, but what we do find is you will miss some things. And so that's why we set as a best practice a quarterly touch-in with our customers to make sure that we're aligning with what their business priorities are. So pretty similar to what Arun's saying.
Perfect, great. And it looks like we've got time for at least one more. So we had one other question. This one is coming in from Jordan, and Jordan has an organization where the learning strategy is high level and broad sweeping across the organization. She wants to know if organizations that are like this, again, high level and broad sweeping across the organizations, do they have executive buy-in? They would like you guys to speak about how an L&D practitioner could start conversations with an executive leadership team.
Sure. So maybe I'll start, and Arun, if you want to add anything.
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
what we've seen really is to be very successful is usually the executive leadership team has initiatives that they are really focused on. And so I would definitely start with that, finding out what those are, and then sitting down with the leadership team to say, hey, they're usually pretty passionate about it, and making sure that you understand what they're envisioning in terms of the training that would need to happen. What I would say, it's not training, it's what's the mindset change? What's the behavior change that they want to see? Because then it's your job in L&D to figure out what training will cause those mindset and behavior changes. Often we find that executives, at least with our clients, that executives who are very passionate about their business objectives or a new initiative are completely willing to be your spokesperson about why those changes need to happen and why they need to take those trainings and participate. So I would say it would be more about approaching that executive leadership team once you know what those objectives are, and kind of, I'd say, backtracking to the learning strategy. Definitely not asking them what training they think we need. That's what I would say you need to derive from their feedback to you, but trying to understand what results or the end result or mindset or behavior they want to see out of the employees. And then you can recommend, as their trusted business advisor, okay, if you want to see this kind of behavior change amongst our employees, this is the type of training program that we need to roll out. So that's what we've seen work amongst our customers. Arun, do you have any comments there?
Yeah, I can add in. I couldn't agree more with you, Diane, and that's exactly what it is. In most of the cases, in most of the companies, where you have this kind of a problem, is where training is, as the cliched word training, is looked upon as as an expenditure, because it is not. We're not able to connect directly with the ROI and showcase the ROI of the training program, and that is one of the reasons why executives are not able to focus on this. If we flip the conversation, as you mentioned, Diane, on the passionate objectives that they have and their pet project, so to speak, and how do we make them successful? So you start from that and backtrack it, and while backtracking it all the time, what you're trying to figure out is what are those measurement metrics that will tell them that they've succeeded. So for example, just to give an example, so if one of the requirements is, let me just spitball it, increase the sales by say 5% or 10%, right? Now what does that mean? Now how are they planning to do this? So you will dig a little deeper and you'll figure out, oh, you are adding one new product and 2 different processes to make sure that the sales cycle is going to be shorter. Oh, very good. So how are you going to do that? And then you go further and say, okay, we're going to get these people, and these people should be able to make so many cold calls, or so many calls, or so many marketing leads should be coming in, and so on and so forth. Then you ask further, and how do you know that they have achieved so much, so on and so forth? So you will finally come to a number which is very tangible. So as long as you impact that tangible number, you can lead up to making a success of the end objective. And then you create a learning program or devise a learning program using off-the-shelf courses and custom courses and other coaching and mentoring networks. A learning program, not a training, but a learning program that'll achieve that one small objective. That'll enable you to showcase how the bigger one is made and achieved. So the connecting and backtracking is the right way to do it. Get first the end objective and go back from there. Diane, you were 100% right.